24 minutes before 9 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this Thursday morning. It is time for NewsBites. This is the portion of AM Ocala Live that Robin and I do each weekday morning from 8:35 or so till 9 o'clock. And we take the news from around the world, and we shorten it. We get to the point, cut to the chase, give you a chance to get on with your day and touch base with the things that are happening around this planet, around your home. We will also tell you the news agencies that we're getting the stories from, so you can look up the news and read the details that we leave out, so that if you're interested to do that. All right, the first one does come from the Associated Press. It is up in Pensacola. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I don't have that story. It is from the Associated Press. This is out from California. Gusty winds that whipped a Southern California wildfire over 1,000 acres of foothills east of Los Angeles eased at sunset yesterday, and mandatory evacuation orders were canceled for 1,650 homes. But the worry is that the winds will pick back up today, igniting the blaze all over again. The treacherous combination of 90-degree heat and up to 90-mile-per-hour wind gusts is making the fire fast-moving and unpredictable. The winds were so fierce that fire crews could not put up any helicopters or planes to battle the blaze. Over 700 troops are battling the fire on the ground. At the fire's height, 7 schools were closed and parents scrambled to take their children away. Francisco Aguilar, a Los Angeles City firefighter who lives in Rancho Cucamonga, picked up his 11-year-old daughter Bella and gave a quote to the press saying, quote, "It's like a madhouse in there." He said that to this reporter from the San Bernardino Sun, going on to say parents are running around trying to grab their kids, and kids are covering their faces with tissues or with their T-shirts, unquote. The winds finally began to ease in late afternoon yesterday, and the mandatory evacuation was canceled shortly before 6 p.m.
Florida State University's Heisman Trophy winning quarterback and baseball player is in hot water because of stolen crabs and crawfish. Major Mike Wood at the Leon County Sheriff's Office says Jameis Winston ordered about $33 worth of seafood from the deli at a Publix store in Tallahassee Tuesday night and walked out without paying. Jameis was very cooperative, he said. In a post-Miranda interview he did, in fact, acknowledge that he had left Publix without paying for the items. Wood said that Winston also admitted that he made no effort to contact the supermarket once he got home and discovered that he had the seafood, but had not paid for it. But Wood says there are no criminal charges because Publix agreed to a diversion program. Winston was issued a civil citation and will have to serve 20 hours of community service. And he still has to pay for the seafood. Florida State University, however, has leveled sanctions of its own. The university reported that it was suspending the 20-year-old athlete from its baseball team, reported by the Florida News Network.
And from the Associated Press, a Montana man is accused of setting a trap and blindly blasting a shotgun into his garage, killing a 17-year-old German exchange student. A Minnesota man is convicted of lying in wait in his basement for 2 teenagers and killing them during a break-in. The 2 recent cases take the stand your ground debate to a new level. Do laws that allow private citizens to protect their property also let them set a trap and wait for someone to kill? We don't want it to be easy to be able to prosecute people, but we want to be able to hold individuals accountable when they have stepped outside the bounds of society. That's a quote from David Laban, who is the president of the Washington, D.C.-based Association of Prosecuting Attorneys. He made the statement yesterday. More than 30 states have laws expanding the self-defense principle known as the Castle Doctrine, a centuries-old premise that a person has the right to defend their home against attack. Laban said, "The name evokes the old saying, 'My home is my castle.' Most of these changes have come since Florida in 2005 became the first state to interpret the Castle Doctrine to apply outside the home with a measure known as the Stand Your Ground law. These laws make it far easier for a person to shoot someone and avoid prosecution by saying they felt an imminent danger from the person, whether or not that person who was shot was armed."
The White House found itself on defense yesterday following the release of emails tying a top aide to former UN Ambassador Susan Rice's controversial Sunday show statements after the Benghazi terror attack. During those interviews, Rice erroneously blamed the attack on protests over an anti-Islam film. New emails indicate a White House advisor helped prep her for those appearances and pushed the video explanation. And now the White House is facing credibility questions after having downplayed their role in Rice's talking points. During a heated briefing with reporters yesterday afternoon, Press Secretary Jay Carney repeatedly tried to claim that the so-called prep call with Rice, as it was described in one email, was not about Benghazi. The prep session, Carney said, was just about the demonstrations elsewhere in the Muslim world that week, reported by Fox News.
And from CNN, a new law that went into effect in Kenya this week makes it legal for a man to marry as many women as he wants, and a leading women's group is applauding it. President Uhuru Kenyatta signed the polygamy measure into law Tuesday, formally recognizing what has long been a cultural practice in the nation. Parliament passed the bill in March despite protests from female lawmakers who angrily stormed out of the late-night session at the time. The bill initially allowed the first wife the right to veto the husband's choice of additional spouses. Male members of Parliament successfully pushed to get that clause dropped. Marriage is the voluntary union of a man and a woman, whether in a monogamous or polygamous union, Kenyatta said in a statement. The Marriage Act of 2014 defines various types of marriages, including monogamous, polygamous, customary, Christian, Islamic, and Hindu marriages, unquote. The law legalizes polygamous unions but does not provide an official limit on the number of wives a man can have. The Federation of Women Lawyers, a powerful women's group, applauded aspects of the bill and criticized others. Polygamy already is a common fixture among many cultures in Kenya and in some other African countries. The bill, the group said, is long overdue because polygamous unions were previously not regarded as equal to regular marriages.
Senate Democrats said yesterday that the Supreme Court has stretched the First Amendment too far when it comes to campaign finances and vowed to hold a vote to amend the Constitution and undo a number of landmark decisions. Senator Charles E. Schumer, New York Democrat and chairman of the Rules Committee, said he will push a constitutional amendment to the full floor later this year that would give Congress the power to impose strict limits on campaign finance. This is his quote: "It will draw to a fine point where we are at, and that is the First Amendment is sacred, but that the First Amendment is not absolute, and by making it absolute, you actually make it less sacred to most Americans," reported by the Washington Times.
And from CNN, on the fateful night that Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 disappeared, officials apparently didn't notice for 17 minutes that it had gone off radar, and it did not activate an official rescue operation for 4 hours. Those are two of the details outlined in a preliminary report by Malaysia's Transportation Ministry released to the public this morning. The report had been sent to the International Civil Aviation Organization, the UN body for global aviation. What's remarkable about the report is what's missing from it. At 1:21 a.m. on March 8th, the plane carrying 239 people to Beijing disappeared from radar in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. By then, the plane's crew should have contacted air traffic control in Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam, but apparently it did not. It wasn't until 17 minutes later that Ho Chi Minh asked Malaysian air traffic control where the plane was. We are left to assume that for those 17 minutes, Kuala Lumpur either didn't notice or didn't act, CNN aviation correspondent Richard Quest said. Then came a 4-hour gap from the time when officials notified the plane was missing to when the official rescue operation was launched. The report gives no explanation for what happened during those 4 hours, other than to say that Kuala Lumpur contacted Singapore, Hong Kong, and Cambodia, and those 4 hours may have been critical.
The dollar held declines against most major peers, including the yen, after the Federal Reserve signaled it would keep interest rates low once its bond buying program has ended. Asian index futures followed U.S. stocks higher, while oil was below $100 on record high crude supplies. The greenback traded at 102.25 yen by 8:29 a.m. in Tokyo, after losing 0.4% to the yen and euro last session. Nikkei 225 stock average futures rose 0.6% in the Osaka pre-market, while Standard & Poor's 500 index futures added 0.1%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average climbed to a record in the United States as the Fed said the economy is gaining momentum. Oil in New York held near a 4-week low after sliding 1.5% yesterday. Platinum extended its April advance, reported by Bloomberg.
From ABC News, former President Bill Clinton joined his wife Hillary Clinton in criticizing the press for the way it covers politics, with the former president arguing that the press borders on blindness when the facts don't conform to a particular storyline. Bill Clinton made his comments at a lecture he gave at Georgetown University. Hillary Clinton made her remarks last year at the University of Connecticut. One of the problems is if a policymaker is a political leader and is covered primarily by the political press, there is a craving that borders on addictive to have a storyline, Clinton said at the beginning of a lecture he gave on policy at his alma mater. He then went on to say, and then, once people settle on the storyline, there is a craving that borders on blindness to shoehorn every fact, every development, everything that happens into the storyline, even if it's not the story, unquote.
More than 400 runners, including runners from 21 different states as far away as California and Hawaii, are expected this Sunday for the run at Caliente, and many will choose to run naked. The free-spirited runners will begin at 8:30 a.m. Sunday during the 5th annual Bear Dare 5K at Caliente Nudist Resort off Land O'Lakes Boulevard. The first run was held in October 2010 as runners shed their running shorts for a brisk 5K. Race director Pete Williams says not only has participation grown each race, many runners are returning each year. Williams wants to reiterate this run is clothing optional, but adds about 85% of the runners are nude. For the third straight year, the race will determine the national championship of nude running. There may be some naked spectators, plus the volunteers are welcome to be naked too. The demographic Williams sees is about 38% female. Afterward, there's a post-race party that will go well into the afternoon, reported by the Tampa Tribune.
And the Associated Press is reporting that officials say a block-long sinkhole opened up in a residential neighborhood in northeast Baltimore, sucking in several cars and forcing the evacuation of several houses. The fire department tweeted on its official Twitter account that a sinkhole opened up yesterday afternoon in the first block of 26th Street. The sinkhole opened next to railroad tracks used by CSX. The block of row houses was being evacuated, and a building inspector has been called. The fire department said no injuries have been reported. A fire department tweet says CSX has suspended rail traffic. According to one witness, the site looks like a landslide happened. Rain has drenched central Maryland for the last 24 hours.
Opium cultivation is estimated to be at an all-time high in Afghanistan, despite the United States spending $7.5 billion to combat it. A report released yesterday by Washington's Afghanistan war watchdog has found that the billions spent by the state and defense departments on counter-narcotics since 2002 has been for naught. Opium poppy cultivation takes up 209,000 hectares or 516,230 acres of land in Afghanistan, a 36% increase since 2012. Drug use inside Afghanistan has spiked, according to the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction. About 1.3 million Afghan adults were regular drug users in 2012, up from 1 million in 2009. Regular opium users grew to 230,000 in 2009 from 130,000 in 2005. The population of Afghanistan is just under 32 million, reported by The Guardian.
And from ABC News, a whale that washed up on shore in Newfoundland is in danger of exploding, according to experts in Trout River, Canada. The town clerk, Emily Butler, told Canadian news service NTV that the blue whale carcass washed up on the town's boardwalk last week and is decaying and filled with methane gas, which could lead the whale to explode. The whale is more than 80 feet long and filled to twice its normal size with methane, she said, noting that if the town pushes it out to sea, the explosion could pose a danger to passing ships. While explosions have been documented before, in 2013, a graphic video surfaced of a dead sperm whale exploding while being studied by a scientist. Butler said the small town is seeking help in disposing of the whale carcass. Wow. And I must tell you, I'm looking at a photograph. This is a huge, gigantic whale that is blown up like a balloon.
Wow.
And there are people standing near. I wouldn't stand near that thing if it's going to explode. That's a crazy sight right there.
At least 2 inmates died and more than 150 other people were injured when an apparent gas explosion collapsed part of a county jail in Pensacola, Florida, late yesterday evening. The blast occurred at the Escambia County Jail's central booking facility at around 11 p.m. Central Time, which is their local time, or our midnight Eastern Time. Kathleen Castro, the county's public information officer, confirmed the deaths to NBC News and said that both prisoners and corrections officials were among the wounded. About 600 prisoners were in the building at the time. Uninjured inmates are being moved to other detention facilities. The injured were transported to 5 local hospitals for treatment. Pensacola had been hit by severe floods earlier in the day, and it was not immediately clear if that was a factor in the explosion, reported by NBC News.
And from the Washington Times, Representative Chris Stewart of Utah, concerned about the armed agents that surrounded Nevada rancher Cliven Bundy's property, is mulling a measure to cut funding for any paramilitary units that work for the Bureau of Land Management, the Internal Revenue Service, and other federal regulatory agencies. There are lots of people who are really concerned when the BLM shows up with its own SWAT teams, he said. And he made that statement to the Salt Lake Tribune. They're regulatory agencies. They're not paramilitary units, and I think that concerns a lot of us, he said. And again, I got the little story from the Washington Times.
Here's a quick question about your retirement savings. When was the last time you checked the fees on your 401k? If you're like most Americans, chances are you're not sure what exactly your plan is charging you. Even though employers are now required to disclose more information about 401k fees, only about half of workers said they actually noticed the data, while just 14% made changes after reviewing the information. This is according to a 2013 study from the Employee Benefit Research Institute. As 401ks gained in popularity during the 1990s and 2000s, employers touted them as a way for workers to take control of their financial future. While that may seem positive, the downside is that employees need to take greater responsibility for being on top of issues such as asset allocation and fees. In addition, employers are increasingly shifting costs onto their workers, making it even harder to save enough for their golden years, reported by CBS.
And from the Associated Press, Virginia state officials are still trying to figure out the environmental impact of a train derailment that plunged 3 oil-carrying tanker cars into the James River. Department of Environmental Quality spokesman Bill Hayden said this morning that state workers smelled oil downstream from the derailment site during a nighttime survey. He said daylight will offer state officials a better look at what the potential danger is. The derailment occurred yesterday in downtown Lynchburg, causing a large and intensive fire, but no injuries. City officials estimate that about 50,000 gallons of oil were missing from the tankers, but were unsure how much had burned up and how much had spilled into the water. Cleanup crews continued working this morning with 2 cranes lifting several derailed cars and moving them to a new track.
Governor Rick Scott has declared a state of emergency for 26 counties in the Panhandle and western Florida. The declaration comes after these areas were hit by torrential rains. Help has already arrived, but more may be needed as residents try to cope with localized flooding and damage to the regional infrastructure. While the worst of the storms have passed the area for now, there are still more concerns ahead. Authorities intend to watch the local waterways for signs that they could be cresting or pushing past safe levels. Authorities say roughly 32,000 Panhandle residents were initially without power, though the lights are coming back on steadily. Officials say relief crews are on scene and more help will be available to an area that is likely to be in need of it before the long dryout begins, reported by the Florida News Network.
And from the Associated Press, visitors will be able to travel through the east, west, and north entrances to Yellowstone's National Park tomorrow. Park officials say many popular park destinations, including Old Faithful, the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, Norris Geyser Basin, and Fishing Bridge will be open. Entrances at Grant Village, West Thumb Junction, and Craig Pass to Old Faithful are set to open May 9th if weather cooperates. Park officials say visitor services will be very limited during the next few weeks. The road from the north entrance to the northeast entrance remains open all year.
The U.S. government probably cannot take regulatory action to stop companies from lowering tax bills through deals that put their legal addresses outside the country. John Koskinen, Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service, said today. Pfizer this week proposed the biggest such deal yet, a $98.7 billion takeover of AstraZeneca PIC that would move the largest U.S. drug maker to the U.K. for tax purposes and lower its tax rate. We've done, I think, probably all we can within the statute. Koskinen, age 74, told reporters in Washington today, saying the trend of corporate moves point up the need to revise the U.S. tax code. We try to make sure people are within the bounds, but if they're within the bounds, if they play according to the rules, then they have a right to do that, reported by Bloomberg.
And from the Associated Press, visitors will be... Oh, I'm sorry. I just had that story. This was from Fox News. 2 Maryland lawmakers are trying to overturn a recently passed transgender rights bill, which they claim would allow men to walk freely into ladies' restrooms. The lawmakers, Republican state delegates Neil Parrott and Kathy Siglia, started a petition drive Tuesday to get the issue put on the November ballot and let voters decide. Seliga said yesterday she fully supports protecting the rights of transgender people, but the so-called bathroom bill could have been written in a better way to protect young girls and women. Again, the story is from Fox News.
Florida's highway speed limit could be going up to 75 miles per hour, and State Representative Irv Schlossberg says it's a deadly decision. This bill is a threat to our public safety. There's 13 states with speed limits at 75 miles per hour or higher, and they have more fatal crashes due to speeding. Despite Schlossberg's plea, the Florida House approved a bill allowing a higher speed limit. Representative Matt Caldwell says 75 isn't really that dangerous. We have roads that are designed to handle as much as 90 to 100 mile per hour traffic, and you have vehicles that can safely travel at very high speeds. This is reported by the Florida News Network.
And from the BBC, Iraqis have voted in their country's first parliamentary elections since the withdrawal of U.S. forces in 2011. Heavy security was in place, with hundreds of thousands of soldiers and police deployed to protect polling stations and a vehicle ban in Baghdad. Dozens of attacks targeting the election across Iraq left 14 people dead. Prime Minister Nouri Maliki, who is seeking a third term, declared that his victory was certain. And that's all the time we have. Thank you, Robin, for the note. All right, we've got to move forward. Veterans News coming up. But first, Fox News. Thank you very much.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. A deadly blast at a jail in Pensacola, Florida.
2 inmates are dead. Officials say 100 to 150 others were injured. That includes both inmates and corrections officers. At the time, there were a total of 600 inmates inside the building.
Fox's Jonathan Seri, the cause under investigation. The region hard hit by flooding, but it's not the only one. A lot of people in the Midwest and up the East Coast also waterlogged, like this flood victim in Philadelphia.
Call insurance, hope the car works when the water recedes. Otherwise, I'll have to tow it.